I elected to chop my second leg off when I was about 27 years old. Made it a tough call, but a good call. It was probably the best decision I reckon I've ever made. G'day, my name is Mike Rolls. I'm born and raised in Melbourne, southeastern suburbs boy, just similar to Dylan. I'm a golf tragic, have been since I was a very, very little fella. I'm doing it tough at the moment because all I'm doing is complaining to those closest to me about not being able to get out in the golf course at the minute. So I'm fairly annoying at the minute.
Fair enough. And what is your disability?
So my disability, I am a double amputee. So I don't have any legs below my knees, and I've been a double amputee for 9 years, but I've been an amputee for around about 18 years. So I elected to chop my second leg off when I was about 27 years old. Made it a tough call, but a good call. It was probably the best decision I reckon I've ever made. So,
not for vanity reasons, surely, right? Not just to even things up.
I reckon there was a little bit of vanity in it for sure. Absolutely. I mean, it was like it was an ugly thing to look at. I remember I used to get it checked out, and we can go into that a little bit later. But it looked like some sort of remember the Flintstones, and you'd see the bones. Like that's kind of what it looked like. It just was this.
Interesting.
This leg that I had to wear a bootie on, and every couple of days it'd break down, and it just wasn't a viable solution. So ended up, making the big decision and amputating the dead weight.
Now, we set up at the start that this was a disease that started your disability journey. Can you tell us why you needed to have your leg amputated in the first place 16 years ago?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, grew up southeastern suburbs, and being in the sporting capital of Australia, I was mad sports person. Just anything that I could sort of get into, kicking the footy, whatever it was, it didn't matter. I'd always be active, and I sort of fell into playing football as we do, and played for the Southern Footy League, the Hampton United Football Club. When I was I started when I was 17, so I was playing against guys. Some of them were ex-VFL, ex-AFL players, and I'm very tall. I'm 6'5", and I weigh about 2 kilos. So I'm like very tall, skinny, and when I looked like a praying mantis. So back then, when I was playing footy against guys that were like twice my size, some of them, hardened seasoned, some of them ex-AFL players as well in the Southern Footy League. So it was quite sort of, I guess a baptism of fire. And I ended up playing with a bunch of great guys, and I got mentored by a guy called Frank Rigolo, who he was huge, big body, just sit in the goal square and just bump people off with his big bum and take the mark, kick goals. But it was a great place to learn and grow. But that ended up leading me down a pretty tough path. After at my second season, we decided to go on an end of season football trip, which you do. Everyone. I was pumped. I was 18. I could legally drink. Could have a little bit of fun with my mates away from my folks. I convinced them to pay for my ticket down to Tasmania, Hobart. We were going.
You are a convincing man.
And I had to sort of, because I was broke, mate. I was 18, had no money. I didn't I remember I worked at Bilo. Remember Bilo?
Oh, yeah. I used to love Bilo.
Yes.
Bilo was the
supermarket.
Aldi before
I
Aldi.
had the biggest dickhead of a boss ever, and I hated working there.
Wasn't Huey's Cooking Adventures the face of Bilo?
I think you might be right. Let's go back a bit, but I think it was. Yeah, Ian Hewitson. Far out, where'd he go? Anyway, so I convinced them to let me go because, as I said, I didn't have a lot of coin, and they did. We finished the season, and then it was off to the trip. I remember I was going across to my mate Tom Evans's house, his brother, and Tom and Matt played together in the team with me, and had my bags packed and could barely sleep the night before. I was so excited about this trip and just what was to come.
The debauchery.
Yeah. So on the way over, Mum's giving me the old pep talk and telling me to behave myself, and I wasn't listening to a lot of what she said. And I got to my mate's house, chucked the bags in the boot, and then I jumped in the car and off we went to the airport to go to Hobart with this great team and some good mates. And I guess that was. I speak a lot, and I tell it exactly how it happened, and I guess that was my very last memory, was actually giving my mum a kiss on the cheek, and then my very next memory was 5.5 weeks later, after I woke up after an induced coma, and I was back in Melbourne, and I woke up to the sobering news that I was going to be in hospital for a very long time, and I was very, very ill. And apparently I did go on that trip, and I had a great time from all reports. So thanks for asking, fellas.
Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm so mesmerized. This story, you tell this story so well.
You get lost in it.
This is Inception. The twists and turns. I think I know where this is going, and then I have no idea. So you went on the footy trip, but just have no memory of the week in Hobart?
Nothing at all. So
and that's not because of the beers you drank.
I thought it was going to be a car accident.
It could have been. No, it could absolutely have been the beers. It may have been, but I think it might have been, the fact that. Well, I'll just go back to the Alfred Hospital. As I said, I woke up and I remember just feeling pain all over my body, and I couldn't really work out where it was. I just knew it was absolutely everywhere, and I'm looking around me and trying to work out what's going on. I'm on a lot of drugs, morphine, etc. So it's not quite crystal clear at that point in time. And I can see I've got tubes and there's beeping and there's, I've got a sheet across my waist as well. So I'm not really aware of what's going on. And then I can see, as I sort of scan down to my right-hand side, I can see that on my right hand, I'm missing 2 of my fingers.
You just showed that to camera as well, and people can probably see this on social media, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm missing my ring finger and my middle finger and my, what do you call the other one? I wouldn't even know.
Index.
The 2 middle ones.
It looks like you're doing...
No, not index.
It's like a rock.
Not index.
It's like a rock. You're doing a rock symbol.
Yeah, you're doing a rock god.
Yeah, a built-in rock god. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I woke up to this, just pain basically everywhere, not really able to work out what was going on. And then I could see my hand, and I'm thinking, far out, like what is going on here? And then I remember sort of vaguely noticing my entire family, my mum, my dad, my brother, and my sister staring down at me in this bed. And your first reaction in that moment is to ask a question. And I remember trying to ask a question, and nothing comes out of my mouth because I've got a tracheotomy tube in my neck as well, which is helping me to breathe. And then I remember this doctor, he comes in and he sort of says to me, Mike, you've been really sick boy, and I'm really sorry you're going to be in hospital for a long time. And I'm thinking, what the fuck is going on here? I mean, my last memory, I'm running around a footy field and I'm fit as a fiddle, and now I can't even lift my arm more than an inch above the bed without my arm shaking completely. I just had no strength. And then he comes in, he says, Mike, you've been sick, you've been in hospital for a long time. I'm really sorry, mate, but you contracted meningococcal septicemia. Now, I didn't even know what that was. I'd never even heard those words before, let alone how does that even happen? What does it mean? And then he came in the third day, and I say first day, second day, third day, but that's what it felt like. It was just like a gradual, like 1 kick in the gut, 2 kick in the gut, 3, and then the ultimate kick came when he comes in and he breaks the news that, Mike, you've been sick, you've been in hospital for a long time, you contracted meningococcal, and I'm sorry to tell you, but you've lost your right leg below your knee and half your left foot. And I guess at that moment, I'm thinking to myself, this doctor seems like a lovely fellow and everything, but I hope he doesn't go back tomorrow because I'm running out of bits at this point in time. Seriously, it's just getting a bit ridiculous. So it just seemed to be bad news after bad news. And, I can't even imagine exactly what my family would have gone through, because in many ways I was lucky in some, the fact that I was asleep through all of this. When I was in Hobart, I breathed in at the wrong time. I contracted this horrific disease that affects, I think, 222 people in any given year in Australia. There's 13 strains of it, and 5 are prevalent in Australia. I caught meningococcal C, was a strain that I caught. And as I said, it causes septicemia. I remember being told that I was about to fly home from the trip, and I was lying on the airport floor rolling around, and my mate said, "Oh, you don't look real good." Everyone thought I was just hungover. I was rushed by ambulance back to Hobart. Yeah, back to Hobart Hospital, and they called my parents and said, "Oh, Mike's just been admitted to hospital. He wasn't feeling too well." And then they couldn't get a lot more information. And then the next morning, they rang up to see where I was, and they said, "You got to get down to Hobart. Mike's got about 1 hour to live." That's how quick it happened. So to give you a bit of an idea, my injuries were just so immense. I mean, it sounds funny to say this, but my physical injuries were the least of my concerns. It wasn't even a big thing. My disability ended up being, I'm a double amputee. But at that point, I had liver failure, kidney failure. I had 3 bleeds in my brain. So they were telling when I woke up that I'd have significant brain damage. My weight went from 80 kilos down to 47 kilos over that 5.5 week period in a coma. And it was just all, it's funny, like you're looking for anything, you're looking for a bit of good news, and there was none. It was just one thing after another. It was golden staph. And then it was another setback, and then they'd take the trachea out. And I'm thinking, wow, great, I can talk finally. And then that was a really scary night where I nearly suffocated after they took that out, because I had so many infections on my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I was so weak. So this is all really lighthearted, guys. What a great way to start the morning.
It's so interesting as well, because it's important to talk about these things, and especially when you don't know much about it. I've got to ask, you said, I just breathed at the wrong time and I got meningococcal.
Yeah.
That sounds petrifying. What does that mean?
Kind of feels like that could happen with COVID.
So was it in the air? Where does it live on surfaces?
Yeah. So I'm going to put a disclaimer on this one straight away, Dill. I'm not an epidemiologist, and I don't understand infectious diseases. And to be quite frank, I don't really care.
Yep.
If there's anyone out there that can correct this, feel free. But from what I understand, I was told that 20% of the population, the general population, carry the germ on the back of their throat. And it only becomes active at certain times of year. So we often see a lot. At the time I got sick, I think there was about 9 cases in particular. And everyone says, oh, there's an outbreak. There's not an outbreak. I mean, none of us came into contact with each other, apparently. It just became prevalent. I don't know. I think the year before I left, I was in Vietnam with a family for a family holiday, and had glandular fever. So I can only assume that maybe that took a bit of a toll on my immune system. I was at the tail end of a football season, and I was drunk, probably, drinking with a few mates, and I wasn't in the best health. Maybe I was run down. I was susceptible to it, and I breathed in at the wrong time. So of the 220 that get it in any given year, 10% lose limbs or die. So it's about 1 in a million chance of getting it. So I certainly don't want to, I'm very mindful of not scaring people in any way. It's a topical subject because of what we're all going through now with the pandemic. But it's certainly something that at least now there's vaccinations available, which is great, that protect against 4 of the strains of the 5.
I've got 2 questions to backtrack on your story where I got lost. What is the septicemia part? You kind of...
Yeah, so meningococcal is basically, so you would have heard of meningitis.
Yeah, of course.
So if people get meningitis, apparently it's when the infection enters the bloodstream and causes blood poisoning, and that's when all your major organs start to shut down. So I developed septicemia, and that's the reason for the amputations. It sounds funny, but my parents in those horrific days had to sign consent forms to allow for the doctors to amputate my limbs. Now I can't even imagine what that would have been like for them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they didn't, I would have died. Yeah, it's as simple as that.
That's like my
parts of my body started to turn black. My blood couldn't pump. It becomes coagulated, a bit like slime, I guess you could say.
They said to my dad, "Can we have to give Dylan a lethal shot of steroids, and he'll probably die. Can you just sign here to make sure that it's okay?" And he's like, "What kind of choice is that?" But they have to do it, and they're glad.
Yes.
Man, you and I are the lucky ones that we don't make those decisions. Like, it's way harder.
That's what I often say that. I said I was lucky. I say, I was having a nice nap for 5.5 weeks while all this was going on. So my parents were faced with unimaginable horror, and I can't ever understand what they went through. And I guess my battle started the moment I woke up, and that's when the fighting began, I guess.
I'm going to be a father in February, and
congratulations!
Yeah, thanks, man.
It's fantastic.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Because I'm scared about like dropping my daughter, let alone having to make these life-changing decisions with her health up until an age where she can consent or, be awake to consent to things herself. I mean, we've had a couple of these stories of amputation. Cherie was another one where her parents had to make the decision for her hip below her leg because of a cancer. They had to make that decision pretty much for her. Man, that's so scary.
When they're cutting off your legs and half your foot, where do they decide to cut? So does the septicemia start from a point and go below? Like, where do they make the decision?
The general rule is that they save what they can.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
So that if they don't have to take parts, it's below the knee, because my foot had gone black and it wasn't had no circulation to it, and then they had to debride part of the foot too on the left side. So they tried to save what they could. Problem with that is, I do a lot of work with Limbs for Life, which is a peak body to support amputees in Australia. And the stories of people trying to save a limb for 9, 10, 11 years and having operation after operation is a very common one. And I guess it's kind of like one of those things, they mean well. But once I got out of that hospital phase, many, built my strength up and got back to trying to live life, that was kind of one of the things that really held me back for many, many years. And you don't put your hand up and say, hey, I want to go back to surgery. It's not a natural decision to make. You're like, hey, yeah, look, I'm up for that. It takes time to process that. And I guess I probably needed the length of time, which was the 9 years to get on top of that decision.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's the same as people that have car accidents and they spend $60,000 a year going to America to learn how to walk again. And they do it for 10 years. They weigh 600 grand and they go, I should have just lived my life in a wheelchair. It's great. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
they got to
I can relate to that.
Yeah, you got to find that themselves. And I'm like, trust me, you're wasting your time. Like, just get busy living. It's a bit different.
Yeah,
but you'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My other part that I want to backtrack to is you said the last memory you have is before you even went on the footy trip is kissing your mum on the cheek. Why don't you remember? Because you were, I imagine you had a great week in Hobart with the guys, and then
I did.
But so how do you not remember that? I can understand that maybe you lose your memory from the point of going to the hospital in Hobart or something.
I think that I was just in massive organ failure, massive shutdown. So they were they'd given me a 5% chance to live, and I had I think they gave. We've got it's a funny thing. I look back now, I think, Jesus, like, but we've got a family friend who's a priest, and he gave me the prayer of the last rites a couple of times in Hobart, and he baptized all the children in our families. He's a really great guy, Father Gerald, his name is. And it was a situation when I woke up that I should have died. I probably should have died. There's no doubt about that. But maybe it's a good thing that all of the massive amount of drugs and pain meds that they have to give you to keep you alive through that time. It's probably a good thing that my memory was wiped. And I remember the first question I asked, funnily enough, was, what's happening in America, was when I could communicate. And they're all like, what are you talking about? And it was because it was just after the 9/11 attacks. But I remembered that.
Oh.
And I remember thinking, I remember asking, I wanted to know what's happening in America. And they were like, oh, they finally got it. And they were sort of explaining things to me. But
they're like, oh, that was so 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, by the way, Mike, you got no legs, bro.
Yeah. That's all I really cared about at the time.
So this week fascinates me that is wiped from your memory. So do your footy mates who had this week of beers, trips around wineries, oyster shucking, I imagine, in Hobart, all the fun stuff.
Mate,
Did you
I've got to
do
be
it
honest
all?
with you. It was probably at the casino, and they didn't move from the casino. And they were just punting and beers. If you're thinking that football trips involve wineries, Angus, I'm not sure which ones you've been on.
I went to Bangalore Road in Thailand. Don't worry, I've done a footy trip. But you were normal? You were normal? You're drinking beers? You didn't spend nights in the hostel or something by yourself?
Well, it must have been pretty bad to go from the airport to back to the Hobart Hospital in an ambulance.
Yeah.
That would have been look, I was too sick to fly. And then, I guess none of them got sick either.
Yeah.
But thankfully one of the guys on my football team stayed back with me and accompanied me back to the hospital, which was, again, I don't really have any recollection. So I'd love to be able to tell you more about the trip, but I just don't know.
Yeah.
So you were up the creek, by all reports.
It was.
Big trouble. At what point did it start to turn, started building your strength back, organs started functioning? And to be honest, the most amazing thing is your brain function. Like, as you said, to have that many bleeds on your brain, and I mean, you're so well spoken. Luckily, the meningococcal didn't touch your face. You're a beautiful looking man too.
So, I did. So I lost part of my nose. So did you know that?
No, I did know that, but like, you can't tell. Like, so just a disclaimer, a lot of people in the Paralympics have meningococcal as well, because it cuts your limbs off. And if you're a double amputee, I tell you what you're good at, being in a wheelchair, because your power to weight ratio is great, right? So it's a really good disability to sometimes have.
Okay.
And so they often have bigger scars on their face, but it did touch your face as well.
Yeah, a little bit. I got so part of my nose I had to chop off, so my left hand side, and there was all like I had an operation early days. And it's funny when it's such a weird. I find it such a strange thing. People are like, oh, I didn't even realize, but I look in the mirror and I'm like, fuck. Like
I didn't know, but it's a good job.
They grabbed my ear. They took a bit of my cartilage in my ear, stuck it on my nose, and it was like a 2-stage operation. They had to do revision to make it like smaller, but he did a good enough job. They were talking about putting a balloon in my forehead and then transferring the skin down here, and I'm like, no way.
I was going to say you do have weird ears, but not your nose. No.
Yeah. No, that's the ongoing joke. I sit there, during Q&A. I sit, sorry, what's that over there? Like I just have a bit of a laugh. The old ear on the ear for a nose.
Well, it's good because people are now going to be pushed to go and see what you look like on our social media now. So, a great way to push people over there. Thanks for that.
But what was the turning point when you're in hospital?
Yeah. So sorry, Gil. Look, I think that the turning point was. I would say there wasn't a great turning point. The turning point was obviously going to rehab. Mm-hmm. I went from the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne after around about. it was a fair while. It was in the months. And then it was a case of going to Caulfield General Medical Centre, which was built to house the returning war veterans. And it hasn't been updated since. Still hasn't. It's just like the biggest dump ever, but they had a great amputee ward. So I remember going the first time, and I was this, skinny mess in a wheelchair. And I'd only just started sitting in a wheelchair because I was so weak. And I literally lost all the grafts on my ass and everything. I had no muscle on my bum. So I used to be in agony when I used to sit up. And I guess I got there. I got to meet my first ever amputee. And that was a really special moment because I hadn't had an opportunity to meet anyone that had been there and done that before. And we're still great mates. His name's Kevin. And I remember so clearly that very first day that I met him, they wheeled me up and I was pretty miserable, wheeled me up. They have an orderly. They wheel you up to the actual amputee ward and he wheels me up through this hallway. And you go past this, the entrance, they thought it would be a good idea to put antique prosthetic limbs from the war, all the wooden arms.
Always do that, man.
Show the history
Mate,
of how far we've come.
Wheelchairs with square wheels. I don't give a crap.
Yeah, exactly. And there was even
piss off.
Yeah. It was ridiculous. It was I looked at them, their wooden legs, and I'm looking at the orderly. I'm like, am I gonna have to wear one of those things? I was just shitting myself. And then we got to the front of the or the start of the I guess the rehab ward where there was amputees. And I'm looking around, I could see these, a few older men. There was this really big, tall fella with red hair, with this leathery skin like a crocodile, freckles all over him, and he's missing half the teeth in his head. He's rough as guts. And his name's Kevin. I didn't know. I'm just watching him, and he's got an above knee, and he's walking around and watching the way the leg was moving and everything. And I'm the orderly's gone by this stage, and I'm just left sitting there in this chair, and I'm just watching and observing. And then all of a sudden, he sees me in this chair, and he kind of looks at me, and he wanders over with his customary, this limp, and he looked down at me. I'll never forget, and he goes, "Mate, you're fucked," like that. That's what he said. First thing he said to me. And I remember looking up and thinking, "Oh, thanks for letting me know, mate. I was totally unaware of that." Like he's pointing at the obvious.
Good.
And then we quickly got chatting and became really great mates. And that was kind of the way that he broke the ice, and it sort of set the tone for our relationship going forward. And I remember looking forward. It was probably the only thing that I looked forward in my life was actually going to rehab because I got to see Kevin and relate to somebody, having someone that I could relate to that had been there and done that. And he pushed me, and I'd like to say I pushed him, but I probably didn't.
I'm sure you did.
But he really helped in those moments. So that was kind of, I guess, one of the turning points that you were saying, Dill, would be around, would have been around meeting someone that had been through something similar, because till that point, I was getting told all about what I was going to be feeling.
Yeah.
By psychs, by OTs, by social workers, by physios.
Who aren't amputees.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's where the power of peer-to-peer support comes in.
Can we talk mindset in the early days? Is there a part of you, because some people who lose a limb, it might be in an accident or it might have been subjected to just that moment, and they might not have had their life in crisis. Their mindset might be different to yours. Do you have a positive mindset that you're thankful to be alive and therefore you're just dealing with the injuries of it? Or what was your mindset in those early days?
Yeah, it's a really funny one. I remember having, I would be lying if I said I wasn't, in a bit of a bad way when it came to Caulfield, because I was 18 years old. All my friends were traveling. They were out partying. They were socializing, and I'm stuck in a rehab ward with majority of the guys that I'm stuck in with are 60-year-old diabetics.
And depressed.
And I'm trying to work out, where the hell how the fuck do you move on from something like this? Like, what's the pathway back? And I remember specifically one of the things that I had to do, and I had to prove to do, which I thought was another crazy thing at 18 years old. I had to prove them to the physios. I had to prove to my nurses and doctors that I had to be able to have a shower on my own. That was my goal. If I could do that, they were going to let me go home. And I couldn't wait to get home. And I remember that morning I got undressed and I wheeled myself into the shower. And again, design floor at Caulfield General Medical Centre was they had a full-length mirror from floor to ceiling on the only entrance and the way into the shower, which is, what a great idea in an amputee ward. And as I wheeled past this mirror, I could see my reflection. And I've got to be honest with you, my mindset went down the drain in that moment. I was confronted with probably the worst sight that I could ever imagine. I wasn't really aware of how bad I actually looked. I had this gaunt, emaciated figure staring back at me. I'm looking down at my right leg, which is missing. I can see this leg with extensive skin grafting and half of my foot chopped off on the left-hand side. And then I looked at my face and I just had these sunken in cheeks. And I thought, well, how the hell do you move on from this? And that was probably the biggest moment of doubt when I thought, I don't think I probably, I'm not sure how I can. I certainly didn't rule it out, but it was at my doubts were probably at an all-time high. But I got in that shower and then I jumped back in the chair, very slowly, mind you. And then I was able to wash myself and then I was able to finally get home after 6 months. And I guess the turning point that Dill asked about came probably a little way after that. And we talked about mindset. In those days, probably I was in a why me mindset and I was stuck there. I was in a resistance mindset where I wasn't wanting to embrace the change. I wanted to go back to the way my life was. I was mourning the loss of a leg and all the rest of it, the loss of everything, loss of my social life, loss of my hopes. All these things were just going through my head and I was focused on the past and I was asking, why me? And I'm not being hard on myself because I understand it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask in those moments. But I remember one day, and I share this story a lot, was a bit of a tipping point. And it was when my dad decided that on a Sunday morning, he wanted to take me out and, go for a bit of a drive with me. And all I wanted to do on Sundays after a big week of rehab was lie down and watch telly like a lot of us do. And he's popped his head into the room and he said, "Hey, Mike, what are you up to?" And I said, "Not much, mate. Just going to sit and watch TV if that's all right." And he goes, we go for a bit of a drive. It's a nice day outside. And I'm like, no, thanks, mate. I've only just got this first prosthetic leg on. It means we're going to have to get into the chair. And I'm thinking, it's all too hard work. So I just start firing excuses at him. And he's not taking no for an answer. And he's got this, real cheeky look on his face. He goes, "Come on, 10 minutes and we'll turn around and I'll pop you back into bed." And I jumped in the chair reluctantly, wheels me out to the front, pops me in the car, put my seat back so that I'm comfortable. And then we start driving to my house in Sandringham down south and we get to about 10-minute mark. And I remember I'm wearing a watch and I'm thinking, okay, you said 10 minutes, mate. So as soon as it hits a 10-minute mark, I turn to my dad and I say, "Okay, enough's enough. You said 10 minutes. Turn the car around, take me home. I'm starting to get really sore. I'm in a lot of pain. I need to get back to bed." And he kind of just ignored me, kept driving. "It's okay, mate. It's a beautiful day. 10 more minutes." So he keeps on driving and I'm getting a little bit ticked off and I'm thinking, how selfish is he being? He's not really considering what I'm going through and how much pain I'm in. He's just doing what he wants to do. And we get about 20 minutes down the road and I remember sort of cracking the shits with him. I go, "Mate, you said 10. I'm doing mathematical sums at this point in time, working out how long it's going to be till I'm back in my bed."
Watching the Super Simpsons Saturday.
Yeah, and he just keeps on driving. He's not listening to what I'm saying. And we get about down towards the Mornington Peninsula and I'm thinking, how selfish. I'm 45 minutes away from home. That's 90 minutes away from the bed. I'm in extreme pain. I don't know what I have to say to make this idiot turn the car around. And then he drives the car into the Dunes golf course driveway. And I remember thinking, what the fuck are we doing here? I'm thinking, well, we had these incredible memories at the Dunes. Dad used to pick me up from school in year 9, year 10 and say, "Hey, do you want to go down and play golf after lunchtime?" And I say, "I'll be at school." And he goes, "No, you won't. Be waiting out the front gate. I'll pick you up and we'll go down and play golf at the Dunes. But don't tell your mum," he used to say to me. So when we drove into the Dunes golf course, I'm like, what are we doing here, Dad? And he goes, "I've just got to go up and take a quick piss. I'll be right back." Parks the car, leaves. And I wait about 5, 6, 7 minutes and he's still not back. And then I look up and I can see he's driving back in a golf cart. And I'm thinking, you cheeky bugger, same look on his face. And opens the door and I screamed at him. I'm like, "What the hell do you think you're doing with that?" And he looks at me and he's got that same look and he says, "Hey, Mike, why don't we go for a bit of a drive?" And all of a sudden, all the things that I couldn't do, all the excuses about why I couldn't do it started to sort of spew out of my mouth. All the limiting beliefs, the why me mentality was just there for everyone to see. And I started to throw excuses as to why I couldn't get in that cart and go up, for a bit of a drive with my dad. And he sort of just pleads with me and he says, "Why don't we, just jump in the cart? We'll go for a quick drive up the first fairway and then we'll turn the cart round, put you back in the car and take you home." And it's fair to say I'm not believing a lot of what he's telling me at this point in time.
I've heard this before, Dad.
Well, yeah, he's full of shit. So I end up, reluctantly, he helps me across. I've got this leg on, I'm balancing so I can pivot. I get into this tiny golf cart and we drive up the first fairway of the Dunes golf course. And I've got to admit, all the pain disappeared. It was just incredible to be outside in, sunshine on my face, smell of the fresh cut grass, away from that sterile environment that I was stuck in for 6 months.
Being normal again,
just live. And it just disappeared. It's amazing what can happen when you're distracted, when it comes to things like pain. But he stops the cart in the middle of the fairway. I'm thinking, what now? I turned around, and then cheeky bugger has snuck a 7-iron into the golf cart and pulls a golf ball out of his pocket. You got that same look on his face. And he says, "Hey, Mike, why don't you have a hit, mate?" And I said, "Dad, I know you want me to have a hit. Now, I know this clearly means a lot for you, but mate, there's no way that I can hit a golf ball. I've only just learned to stand up on this leg. I've only learned to just transfer from a car to a wheelchair, from a wheelchair to a car. There's no way I can swing a golf club, let alone hit a ball." And he says, "Well, it's okay." He goes, "How about this? What about I hold you up by the hips? If you fail, no big deal." So he sits there and I, reluctantly agree again. And I get out of the cart and I get my balance best I can. I take a couple of steps. I drop the ball in the fairway. Dad's holding me up by my hips. And I remember I got as balanced as I possibly could. And I swung back. And as I came through, I made this most crisp, beautiful contact with the golf club. It came right out of the middle of this 7-iron. It must have gone like 140, 150 meters down the fairway. And Dad's so excited, he's completely forgot to hold me. He's like, "Great shot, mate." Completely fell flat on my face on the first fairway of the Jude's golf course. And he's dancing around like a cat on a hot tin roof thinking, "Oh my God, I've hurt him even more than he's already bloody hurt." And he hadn't hurt me. And I remember I rolled over and we both had a bit of a chuckle and a laugh in that moment together. And it's something that I share that story quite a bit because I think we all have someone like my dad in our lives that pushes us when we don't want to be pushed. And I realized in that moment that if I had any chance whatsoever of living a happy, healthy life, given the circumstances and given the misfortune of breathing in at the wrong time and getting this horrible disease, that I had to stop telling myself all the things that I couldn't do and start focusing on the things that I could. And that's where I guess the mindset and the mentality changed. And it was thanks to the help of my amazing dad. I went from that why me mentality to saying, well, what's next in my life? And that's always been, I guess, my mantra from that point in time has been, why don't we ask what's next? Why don't we look to the future? It's okay to look back, but we've got to be looking back so that we can learn from the past. We can't be stuck there. We can't be wanting to go back because it's just not possible. So from a mindset perspective, that's something that's really helped me, asking what's next, building momentum when there is none. And it's been something that I've kept with me. And I'm really thankful to my dad for that.
Beautiful stuff, man.
Mate, that's an amazing, beautiful story.
That's so good. And also, was not the last crisp 7-iron you hit, was it? Because you are now a double amputee with one half a hand, another hand, bit of a weird nose, but you play off. You're like a proper professional golfer these days. What do you play off the stick?
At the moment, I think 5.2.
People that play golf,
I certainly would not consider myself to be a professional.
Mate, you played at the Australian. Did you not play the Australian Open?
I played pretty good.
You played at the Australian Open for people with
I was the worst of the Aussies that played. So I got a Guernsey. So
happy with that.
Yeah. So but we've had some incredible experiences. There's been some great movement over the last 2 or 3 years, thanks to a guy called Christian Hamilton from Golf Australia, has really advocated for people with disability to get involved in the sport at an elite level. And we've had these amazing opportunities where we've obviously had the inaugural All Abilities Championship at the Australian Open, where internationals came across for that up at the Lakes. And then the World Cup was another thing. We played they call it the Disabled Golf Cup, the ISPS-handed Disabled Golf Cup. And the Aussies, I think it was the 6 best Aussies versus the 6 best internationals we played as well. So there's some great things. And then also we had an opportunity to play a 10-hole sort of exhibition event at the President's Cup, which was again, just absolutely incredible. There's some amazing people that you meet. I'm sure Dylan could say the same, being involved in sport, disability sport, you just meet some incredible athletes. And I know we mentioned before some of the meningococcal survivors that are on the Paralympic team. Eliza O'Connell, I'll give a shout out to her. She's a meningococcal, and she was saying that she does a lot of wheelchair events as well.
Yeah, there was one of my old basketball teammates. Shout out to Bridie Keane. I played over in Illinois with her. She was the captain of the Australian women's basketball wheelchair team, the Gliders, and I call her Bridie No Toes because she lost her feet to meningococcal.
Only you can say that.
Shout out to Bridie No Toes.
I met Bridie early on, actually. Yeah, I met Bridie very, very early on, actually,
she's
years and years ago, and it was, she's a really lovely person for sure.
So when your dad took you out on that fairway, the dunes, you were an amputee, one below the leg, and you had lost your foot. At this stage, you weren't the double amputee that you are now.
No. So I made a decision. Not 9 years later, what I did was I sort of just got on with things as best I could, and that meant dressing my foot every second day for 9 years, which is a real pain in the ass. But it's something I just sort of said, it is what it is. You know, I used to use that a lot, you know, and I like that term when you're referring to something that you can't change. I think it makes sense and it's helpful. But when you're referring to something that you just don't want to make change on, I think it can be pretty destructive. And that's what it sort of became. That foot was like, it is what it is. Not much I can do about it. Until I had a checkup at the Caulfield, had to go back into Caulfield. I avoided it like the plague, but I had this regular checkup. And my doctor unwraps a foot. She looks at it and she says, I don't like the look of that foot, Mike. And I said, neither do I. It's ugly. And she goes, I think it's a bit angry. You should go off and get a scan. So I did. And I came back a couple of days later and she said, Mike, I'm sorry, you've got osteomyelitis in the bone, which is a low-grade bone infection. And I was thinking to myself, what does that mean? And she goes, well, your body's always fighting an infection. You know, how do you feel? And at 27 years old, I'm like, I'm okay, I guess. And she goes, what about your pain levels? Yeah, I've always got pain. It's through the roof. Mm-hmm. And she's like, what about your appetite? Yeah, it's not great. I don't eat much for my appetite's pretty small. And she started to point out and pinpoint all these things that was wrong with me and how things that I guess had become camouflage over time. And she said, yeah, it's because you're always fighting an infection. You probably should do something about that. And I guess by bringing these things that were in my subconscious into my consciousness, I was able to sort of, you know, really come to terms and be honest and take ownership of the situation. And I kind of made a decision there where I had the benefit of knowing what it was like to wear a prosthetic leg on the right side. So I kind of said, oh, look, you know, what about if I just, you know, even it up, get it chopped off and put it behind me. So I went and saw 5 different surgeons and I wanted to do my homework because I didn't want to, it's obviously a pretty large decision, I guess you could say, chopping off your only remaining limb. So I wanted to do my homework. So I did. First surgeon, again, with the mindset, and again, I understand it was like, oh, look, we want to take, you know, before you go and do anything drastic, we'll take a flap from your back and put it on your foot and try and, you know, heal it that way. But Mike, you'll spend 6 months in hospital. And I'm like, you know, piss off. There's no way I'm spending 6 months in a hospital again. Till eventually I found one surgeon. And the big difference was this. A lot of them will tell you what they're going to do to you or for you. And I've, you know, in terms of advocating and empowering people to advocate for themselves, one of the most amazing experiences was I went to a surgeon called Dr. Michael Jung, and the first question that he asked me was, what do you want to do? And I told him exactly what I wanted to do. I said, I want you to chop my leg off. Can you do that? And he said, yeah, I can do that. It'll be a 2-stage operation. You might need revision, but I can do it. And I booked in the surgery date that day for 5.5 weeks later. And I remember feeling totally a level of anxiety I've never experienced. You know, like, what am I doing? You know, have I made the right decision here? Like, what if something goes wrong? You know, it was this massive decision, but the evidence was overwhelming that it was the right one. So I remember going as a lead up to that surgery came. I was, you know, the anxiety levels increased. I wanted to bail plenty of times. I just wanted to say, okay, yeah, look, you know, it was a nice idea, but I don't really want to do that. But I didn't. I stuck to it, and I had the surgery. I think it was a 6-hour surgery and then another 6 hours to reconstruct the limb. It was about 140 stitches because I had all these skin issues. So they had to totally, and funnily enough, like I coach people that experience injuries, and I took one of my clients to him the other day because he's got a through-knee amputation, and we were talking about what he did to me, and he goes, I've got the photos. Do you want to see them? He had all the surgical photos.
Wow.
And I said to him, I don't want to see them, but can you airdrop them to my phone? Because my wife's a freak and she loves seeing all this sort of stuff. So I've got them on my phone, and I've sort of seen a glimpse, but I can't, you know, what he had to do. These guys are miracle workers. You'd never even know their name.
Yeah.
So he did this huge reconstruction. It looked like a giant Christmas ham. And I remember waking up thinking, how the fuck am I ever going to get that into a socket? But over time, it sort of settled down. I was able to put a leg on. And then I was able to walk relatively pain-free, and that was a really liberating moment. And I guess that's, I don't want to say it's when my life started again, but it kind of felt like that.
Oh. Now, you touched on your wife. We'll get to her in a minute. I want to hear about how you went about dating. However, going to double amputee also enabled you to do something else. Now, we had somebody called Curtis McGrath on, who's a double amputee, and he's a big boy. And I was like, Curtis, you 100% have juiced yourself up. You aren't that tall. But he reckons he was that tall. Now, Mike Rolls.
He's probably fibbing, yeah.
Have you juiced yourself up? Are you taller now?
Yeah, I'm an inch and a half taller.
Yeah. So how big were you and how big you were?
You were 6'5".
So I'm about 6'5" now, and I wasn't even aware that I'd become taller, but it happened because I got some new legs made, and then I went straight, obviously, as you do. I'm going to see if I can play golf in these new things. So I went to the golf course, and I could barely hit the ball, kept topping everything, and I'm like, not hitting it well. I'm like, what is going on? And then I remember putting my old legs back on because they're kind of sore. So I got back to the car. I have I always carry a spare pair of legs around wherever I go, as you do.
Your boot's a lot different to mine.
Yeah. I've got 8 legs altogether. And when I chucked the other pair of legs, and I'm like, wow, I feel shorter. And I did some measuring, and then I went back to my prosthetist the next day because I had to do a few adjustments. I'm like, mate, you realise you made me about a full inch and a half taller than I was. And he's like, that's okay. He goes, we'll just pop you down a little bit. I'm like, don't you bloody touch me. So I just I decided to stay up here, and it's the air's a little bit fresher up here, Dill. So.
I definitely wouldn't know. When I sit on a tall hill, I'm like, wow, I'm so tall. It's a bit scary. Hey, what about Jason Day or Tiger Woods going, I'm swinging like a rusty gate today. I might just get some more legs out, grow a bit, just smack it down the fairway. Oh,
yeah, I mean, look at and it's funny. The legs that I wear for golf are totally different. Like they're not easy to walk around. They're more flexible. They twist in the sockets, so I can get through the swing a bit better. And they're just my golf legs. So you just got to pay for extra luggage when you do interstate. When you go interstate playing golf, it's a bit of a pain. So they take up a lot of room.
Now, Mike, I've got a question about your name, Mike Rolls. It seems a little bit too perfect for a guy who has
disability. He was in a wheelchair for a while.
You're in a wheelchair for a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it a stage name?
Me, Angus. It's certainly not a stage name. No. It's not a stage name. It's a stage name. I've got a stage name with my greatest mate, Ben Pettingill.
We're going to get to that.
Do know.
Hit us now. So Ben Pettingill, who was episode 2 of the ListenABLE podcast, he's low vision, pretty much blind, 98% blindness. What are your?
That's what he says.
That's what he says. I reckon. Hey, he goes, "Oh, Dill, you forgot your water bottle." How do you even know?
And we saw him spill a beer, over in a pub once. I was like, he's blind.
Yeah, we had a beer with him, and he fresh aired his beer and just slapped it all over my brother Zach. So maybe he is blind. But what do you
guys, accident there, mate.
No.
What do you call yourselves, you two?
So we've got our business is called Real Life Resilience, and we do. But apart from that, I mean, the name you're referring to, we do a corporate double act, which is a little bit different. We had a lot of fun with it, called Legless and Blind. So,
which doesn't relate to alcohol like the beer we were talking about.
No, it certainly doesn't. But we've become really good mates, and we spend a lot of time together. He's a remarkable human being. I'm sure everybody would know. I listened to his episode as well. Don't get sick of hearing, but he walks his talk, Ben. He knows exactly where he's headed. He's got a very, very mature head on his shoulders. And he's more than myself and probably Dill as well.
One of the only negatives about Ben's life was the MC that he had at his wedding.
Wanker. That guy was an idiot. Like, where did he get him from? Yeah. He was a total tosspot.
Mention again, Legless and Blind. You say it's a double act, but it is actually 2 incredible stories. If people are looking for speakers at their next event, corporate, whatever, make sure you do. I guess you can Google Legless and Blind and you guys will come up, right?
Real life resilience.
Real life resilience, right.
Yeah, so it's based on lived experience, which again, that stems from that peer-to-peer stuff we spoke about. Having people to extract learnings from a real life experience that have got success through adversity, I think is an incredibly powerful thing and something we all need right now.
And can I actually I'll say this on behalf of Dylan, it is very true, and I don't think the management can underestimate the importance of having people like yourselves and Dylan come and do these speeches. We have spoken about this on the podcast before, but there was an episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire recently where one of the contestants spoke about seeing Dylan do a corporate speech, and he said it was the first time that he became comfortable with his disability. And I don't think his managers at the time would have realised the impact they had on their one employee, but it was life-changing for him. So if you are listening, I know we always spruik, get in contact with these amazing people, our guests on the show, but it can't be lost that you probably don't even understand somebody might have a disability within your corporation, and it's not because they have the strength or power to own it that you know about it.
And I think the big thing as well, which you'll agree, Rolsey, we work together at Gets Good Acts, which is a company I have. It's tough to get Rolsey because you're so busy. And the stuff you do. managers and companies don't realize they need it. You know what I mean? Like they don't realize that disability affects their life, or they don't realize that people that work there might be going through MS, might be going through something, and they don't want to talk about it, do they?
Or have an accident that's going to happen in the future and that's going to rock their lives, but they might have some sort of base of understanding thanks to you guys. So from an able-bodied guy, I'm so in awe of all the guests that we have. And Mike, this has been incredible so far, but we do continue. We need to know, of course, Dylan's one of your mates. He goes, we've got to talk about the missus of Mike.
Yeah, she's out there doing a workout at the
Oh,
moment, actually. So she's...
And you're batting well. And you're a good-looking man, but you're batting as well. Batting well about
Yeah, of course.
So am I.
I'm well aware of that. Yeah, she's incredible. So one of the things I'll say about her first up is that she's probably the most positive person I reckon I've ever met. Like, she doesn't really have a bad day. It's kind of weird in a way. I even when she's grumpy, she's kind of not grumpy. She's just got an incredible outlook, and she's American. She's from Alabama. We met about 4 years ago. She was out here, followed her company to DePuy Synthes, it was called, or Johnson & Johnson. So she's a medical sales rep, and she got an opportunity to come from Australia. And it's not really a normal thing for someone from the south of America just to relocate to Melbourne, Australia. But that's the kind of person she is. So she decided to relocate here. She had a job, lived in Richmond in her apartment, and I was single at the time. And I'll share the story of how we met, because it's quite a funny one.
Thank you. That's what we're after here.
Yeah, we were both on a website that you may or may not know, Dylan and Angus, called Plenty of Fish.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Of course, it's a RSVP, Plenty of Fish, all those styles. Yep.
You Harmony style.
Probably before Tinder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we were both on there at the same time. She actually contacted me. I want that on the record. And she says, "Hey, how you doing?" So we got chatting, and then we had a quick phone call, and I said, and then we organised a date, which was actually an uncle in Balaclava. There, we decided to go, and at no point in time before we got to the restaurant or anything like that did she ask me anything about my disability. Had she have asked me, I would have, of course, spoken about it.
We'll stop there for a second. You were open about your disability on your profile.
Or was it just a photo of your face?
Well, I wasn't. So that's another one as well. It's a funny one, because you don't want to be defined by your disability. I don't want to say, "Hi, I'm Mike. I've got no legs. I love playing golf."
Should be the 100th thing about you. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why do we have to do that? Like, why do I have to? Why does it have to be? In some ways, it might be a great filter, because if someone has a problem with it, then they're going to know straight up that, I don't know. You could ask anyway.
But it leaves you.
A long story short.
No, but on the contrary, it leaves you open to you look like a bit of a jerk, because if you turn up and the person doesn't know you have a disability and you spring it on them. So it's a 50-50. Could be either way.
But
it's a tough one. It's a really tough one to broach. Yeah.
I'll also say that's why at the start of all of our podcasts, we like people to introduce themselves first, and then the first question we ask is, "What is your disability?" Because we want that to be the secondary part of the introduction. It's very important to us at the start.
Unless people want to be,
of course,
use their disability identity language first. You know, it's a choice for people. Just had to put that disclaimer in there.
Of course.
Yeah. Look, it was a tough one, but I just thought, you know what, if anyone asks, I'm more than happy to be open, honest about it. It's not like I was trying to hide anything, but we went to dinner, and I wear long pants and I wear shorts sometimes. I was wearing long pants. You can see that I'm missing a finger pretty easily. That's an easy one to pick up, and my nose as well. We went and we met, and I was like, wow, God, she has like the most amazing teeth you've ever seen in your life. Like, she's just got these amazing big white teeth.
Can confirm.
And she was stunning. I was like, goodness me, she's really, really beautiful. And we were chatting, and we got along great as well. Like, it was just great banter, good connection. And we finished the meal, and straight away I said, I obviously lived in Balaclava. She was in Richmond, but I said, would you like a lift home? Gentlemanly thing to do. And she said, sure. So she drove me home. We went all the way up Chapel Street, and we were still continuing on this fantastic conversation. We got to her house, and I remember I was sort of a bit nervous, and we parked the car at the front of her house, and she's like, "I live over there." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I had a great night. We should do it again sometime." And she's very forthright, being American. She goes, "Well, aren't you going to walk me in?" Like that. Like, I can't do her accent, but she insists that I walk her to the door. So I get out of the car, walk to the door, and then we sort of, like, I remember so clearly that we had our first kiss, but it was one of the most awkward moments I've ever had, because we both have massive teeth, and we went in for this kiss and our front teeth banged together first up. So it was really, it was just, I was like, oh shit, you know, like, but then anyway, I said goodnight to her. I went home, and I'll never forget, Andrea's quite good on the old Google, and she'd already knew everything about me prior to meeting me, which she didn't let on. And then I got a message later that night. She said, Mike, I just want to let you know that I had a fantastic night with you tonight, and I know about your legs, and I don't care.
Oh,
and I thought that was just a really, you know, right then and there, I thought, you know, she's a pretty special person to begin with. I'm very, very lucky. And now we've been married for a year, and we're trying to for a family. And yeah, I'm just, it's a good place to be in.
Congratulations.
Did you reply? I've got the important leg.
yeah. Well, that was always. I mean, that was on the agenda, wasn't it? Surely.
Is there?
I can tell you a story off air about that one, Dill, but there was nothing too bad.
Give us to us on air.
Okay, well,
yeah,
all right, I can do that. So, well, we had our second date the night. Oh, she's out the front there. She'll probably kill me. But we had our second date the night before. It was a bit of a laugh actually, and we were very attracted to each other. So after we ate dinner, she'd organised this beautiful dinner, cooked dinner. After we ate dinner, we were started to smooch on the couch as you do, and things were sort of progressing. We were kind of getting hot and heavy, and we decided, as you do, two consenting adults, we would take it to the bedroom. Get to the bedroom, and I can't believe I'm get to the bedroom. You're doing like this. I'm not sure if I've told you this, and we start. We were on the bed, hot and heavy, and then all of a sudden I stopped, and I said to her, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but this never ever happens to me." And she's looking at me, and she's going like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "Oh, that's okay. Like, that's okay. No worries at all. Like, this happens sometimes." Like, and she's thinking something. I'm like, no. And I realized what she was thinking. And I go, no.
No problems.
You don't have a hammer, do you? And she goes,
"What the?"
"Yeah, out in the second drawer down, there's a hammer." And I'm like, "Oh, I'll be right back." My leg, I've got to press a button on my leg to get it off, and it had become fused, and it does very, very rarely become fused. And I needed a hammer to be able to bash my leg.
I thought you were about to Dirty John it.
I'll go, I'll be right back.
Weird stuff.
And then I bashed both legs. Off they came, and the rest was sort of history. It was a bit of a funny moment.
Amazing.
For sure.
Wasn't the only hammering going on there.
Okay, Dylan, don't need your double entendres. Mate, that's amazing. You're amazing. That was a thrilling story.
We are 50 odd minutes in, brother. Your storytelling just flows so beautifully. You know what I mean? And I think that's why we get on really well. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. We do have one more thing before we leave, though. We ask people a bowl of uncomfortable, a question sent in from a listener, whereby we, you can answer it. You don't have to answer it. To see how you go. Angus, do you have it?
No.
Oh, okay. We have to come up with one now.
We have to come up.
Oh, yeah. I remember what it was. Yeah. Well, we've got two, actually. One, do you feel bad or guilty about profiting off your disability in your work?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
I don't know. I think that that was never the way that's the wrong way round when you say it like that to me. That's how I feel anyway.
Yep.
I never sat up one day and go, you know what? I'm going to use my disability to profit.
Well said.
It was more of a case of people saying, "Hey, would you feel comfortable coming and sharing your story?" Early days, and I'm like, okay. And then I went to a school in front of 150 kids, and I had a 45-minute keynote to do, and I burnt through all my material in 5 minutes, and I had nothing else to say. So it wasn't a great experience. And I realized there's a lot more to speaking than people think. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, they get paid so much money for an hour keynote." A lot goes into that. Lived experience. Everything you've experienced to date, and also to be able to get up and share it with people is a big thing as well. Do I feel guilty about profiting from it? No, I don't. I really don't. I feel like I get a lot of, I'm in a very privileged position. Dylan will be able to relate to this. So will Ben. Anyone that's on stage. We are in an amazing position where people will come up to you after you've spoken and share their deepest and darkest with you because you've been vulnerable and you've shared something and you've moved or had an impact. I'm not saying by any stretch that I have an impact on everyone I speak to. I don't. But there may be one or two people that are battling that may have heard one or two snippets of information when I'm speaking that they relate and connect to that may help them in some way. And if I'm doing that, then that's okay. And if people are willing to pay for it, then I'm not going to feel guilty about profiting from it.
And you should be remunerated for that. You know what I mean? Like you've been through it. Last one. If you could go back in time and not suck in that disgusting Hobart air, that
actually the cleanest air in the world.
No, that's what's funny.
Tasmania has literally the best air in the world.
That's what's funny. It's in Tasmania for some reason.
I love it. I love it down there. We still go down there and go to the
go shuck some oysters, mate, and go to some wineries.
It's an incredible place. Sorry, go Jill.
Would you go back in time and change that because it had, a big impact on yourself and your family? Are you comfortable with what happened, or would you try and alter?
Yeah, look, I get asked that question almost, every other day. And that's always a question that audiences ask, and I guess that's it gives you a bit of an indication of where people's heads are at. Like they want to go back and change. And it's again, going back to that, well, why me? Why did this have to happen to me? Mm-hmm. If you asked me that question, maybe 5 to 7 to 8, 9 years following my illness, I probably would have answered with, I would go back and change it. But 18 years on and knowing how far I've come and how it's just become my life. And whilst it's not the perfect life, it's a life that I've grown to love and I guess be proud of the fact of what I've been able to overcome instead of seeing that as something that's a negative. I don't think now I would ever change it. It's just part of who I am now, and I accept it. And it's taken time to get there, but it's a really powerful thing.
That's the best answer possible, and that's amazing that is the answer. But could you justify answering that as yes? Do you have in the back of your subconscious? You've got a reason. There's a little bit of you that goes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can spend all day floating and flirting with that question.
Yeah.
But I mean, how's it going to help me? And where's that energy going? It's just totally. You meet so many people that get stuck there, mate, and particularly with amputees, you end up being totally defined by it. They know, they can tell you the hour and the date when they had their amputation. I don't give a shit about any of that. It's not going to change anything. So I don't think, of course I could justify it because it'd be a shitload easier to live your life if you didn't have to pop legs on and you didn't have to have lower back pain at the end of every day. And you didn't have to, going down to the beach and not being like, Dill could understand that too. It's a massive event sometimes, having to get into water and things like that. And it would make things easier, but at the same time, it's kind of just what I know now. One of the funniest things, and this is going to sound ridiculous, man, I am the biggest whinger in the whole world when it comes to wearing face masks. Like I hate wearing a face mask. It's like you can't breathe properly, and everyone that'll listen, I'll tell I hate wearing a face mask. And someone said to me the other day, a mate of mine said, mate, he goes, Mike, you realise every single day you've got to put 2 prosthetic legs on, don't you? And you're whinging about a face mask. I'm like, yeah, I am. I guess it's a good point, right? So, but it's true. Like I've become so used to it that it's just part of my life.
You're a beautiful man with a beautiful story. There's so many great reasons why I love this podcast, but there's two reasons why I don't. One, I just cancel myself out of business for speaking because you are such a great storyteller. And number two, other radio stations around the country are stealing our guests.
They are.
And using them on their radio show. Ben Pentonville got stolen. Guess who's about to get stolen?
Yeah,
Mike Rolls. Because you are a weapon. You're very good, my friend.
Yeah, and I thank you guys. You guys have been fantastic, and you mentioned before that I've got a great way of keeping the conversation flowing. I would challenge you on that because you guys have great rapport and being able to ask the right questions. So it just felt like this morning coming on here, hopefully people got something out of it, but it was also really conversational and great to chat with you guys.
And quick, you got a book as well. What's it called?
It's called Ditch the Dead Weight.
You can catch that. And also, what's your socials?
I don't really. I'm very low.
Let's go again.
Mike Rolls 6 on Instagram.
And what's the best way via email?
Just Well, Mike at realliferesilience.com.au, which is a business that Ben and I have together, and we're doing some great things in schools at the moment. We're doing a whole bunch of video content because virtual is the new norm and the new future. We've created a really great program to help kids build resilience called the Game Plan, which is currently being sold into schools around the country. So if you want to contact me, you can get in touch with me, Mike at realliferesilience.com.au.
Good on you, Ledge.
Roger, man.
Love
Thank
you.
you.
When are you going to teach me how to play golf as well?
When you make time for me, bud.
Okay.
Anytime you want.
Good. Yeah, we'll finish on that note. See you,
Thanks,
mate.
Mike.
See you, mate.